Well, good afternoon. Welcome, and thanks for joining us today for our COVID-19 Resources for Our Communities webinar. My name is Sandy Ratliff. I am with Virginia Community Capital, and I am proud to partner with the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development and the Virginia Small Business Development Center Network to present these sessions weekly. Our objective each week is to share some of the latest resources and tips to help our businesses and communities through the pandemic. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that in order to keep the webinar flowing, we're going to make every effort to stay in the 1 hour, so we have muted everyone. However, we do want to hear from you. I know our presenters do. So if you would please, if you have a question for them, post those in the Q&A or also in the chat feature, and we will address those at the end of the session. I'm excited to have representatives with the Virginia Employment Commission and the Spark Mill with us today to share some information and tips about reopening in the COVID-19 world. A quick introduction of our panelists. We have Melissa Short. She serves as the Rapid Response Reemployment Manager with the Virginia Employment Commission. Melissa has numerous years of experience working with customers in the VEC offices as a workforce service representative with a focus on finding employment opportunities for unemployed Virginians. Joining Melissa today is Michael Abraham, who is currently the VEC EO Federal Monitor and shares a enormous amount of experience with the VEC Office Management and Claims Adjustment. During the COVID-19, Michael provides training to the VEC staff on the changes that have been made as claims are filing processes due to the CARES Act. And then joining the group is Sarah Milton. Sarah is the CEO and founder of the Spark Mill. It's a change management and strategic planning firm located in Richmond, Virginia, and operated in the Mid-Atlantic region. Sarah has over a decade of experience in consulting, leading change initiatives for businesses, nonprofits, and government entities. The Spark Mill specializes in the cross-section between strategy and action and employee and community engagement. I welcome each of our presenters. I know that you have a lot on your plate with all that's going on, but thanks for spending your lunch hour on Friday with us, and also thank all of those that are joining us in the webinar. I am going to turn it over to Melissa at the Virginia Employment Commission and let her share everything that's going on there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sandy. It's an honor to be present here with everyone in this virtual community. We are happy to participate and to share what we can about what's happening amidst this unprecedented time in our society, I guess we could say, in the world. So just to give you a little bit of information about Rapid Response Services, Rapid Response is a proactive, business-focused, and flexible strategy designed to respond to layoffs and plant and business closures by quickly, thus the word rapid, coordinating services and providing immediate aid to companies and their affected workers. The Rapid Response teams will work with employers and any employee representatives at this point virtually in a COVID-compliant format to quickly maximize public and private resources to minimize disruptions associated with job loss. Rapid Response can provide services such as reemployment services, career counseling, job search, skill building, all kinds of different services for your employees if a WARN notice is filed. We also work with you if a WARN notice is not filed. And so a WARN notice, you may know, is a worker adjustment and retraining notification that requires an employer to let us know you're going to lay folk off. And we've gotten over 180 WARN notices since mid-March. We are looking forward to working with those companies once they return to business. So I'm going to give over now to Michael so that Michael Abraham who's also my colleague, can share what it is he does within the Virginia Employment Commission and how it impacts you, especially through the CARES Act. Michael.
Thank you, Melissa.
Michael,
Melissa?
we can't hear you. Could you try it again, please?
I think he's having some internet issues.
Help them out with the mass influx of claims that we've had since all this started. So on your screen, you should see these 4 links. These are from our website, and it gives a lot of, if you go through these links, at your time, it gives a lot of information about what we're doing right now that came down from the federal government in the CARES Act. And I'm not going to go through all of these now. I'll just briefly discuss the different programs. So currently we have 4 programs. You have regular unemployment that, people who normally would qualify for unemployment that's the main site that we would use. And you have to, you can file a claim either way by our call center or internet. I recommend the internet version because there's no way you're going to get through our call center, unfortunately. They can only handle about 3,000 calls a day, and the management and the call center shut the phones down around 9 o'clock because they get 3,000 people on the queue right away. Now, I think this audience is mainly employers, so I'll be brief about claimants filing claims because I know you want to know about what, as an employer, what your options are. So, but we have these 4 programs. You have regular unemployment, we have PUA, pandemic unemployment assistance, we have FPUC, and there's later down the road there's going to be PEUC. So regular unemployment, that's for people who have worked in covered employment. You as an employer giving them W-2s. They file a claim if they were laid off or they quit or were fired. We send you a separation report. That's important that when you all receive these from us, to return those to us and complete them. And I'll touch on that, some of your options that you'll have down the road when you start reopening your business, what you can do with those separation reports. Normally unemployment, regular unemployment, one has to work at least a minimum of 2 quarters in our base period and earn at least $3,000, which you as employers report to us on a quarterly basis normally. And that's to qualify for a minimum claim, and which is like $60 a week. The maximum amount is $378 a week. That's for people who generally earn more than $40,000 a year. And normally we pay up to 6 months or 26 weeks, anywhere from 13 to 26, depending on what you've earned. This CARES Act has changed that a little bit. And so now people who qualify for regular unemployment are also receiving an additional payment, and that's the FPUC payment. So effective March 28th, if you are qualified for regular unemployment, whatever your weekly amount is, say anywhere from $60 to $370, you're also going to get an additional $600 a week, which is unprecedented. We've never paid that much. And it's going to, as you'll see or already seen, it's going to make it hard for your former employees to come back to work. It's going to be hard to get them off of that. So we have a process for that, for you all to let us know how to do that. And then if you remember in the last recession 11 years ago, the 26 weeks, a lot of people weren't able to return to work in those 26 weeks. That was a different situation. The economy was poor. Right now it's, high unemployment because of this pandemic. The states are closing, or forcing you to stay closed. So it's a different scenario, but the last unemployment program is called PEUC, and it's essentially an extension of benefits. So if you receive your regular unemployment from 13 to 26 weeks, whatever you qualify for, and you exhaust that and you still aren't able to return to work, there'll be an additional 13 weeks and potentially another 11 weeks on top of that. Depending on how the economy is and when the governors reopen open us up for business. So the last unemployment program is PUA, and this may actually benefit some of you employers because that is That is an unemployment program for people who don't qualify for the traditional unemployment. So that's for people who are self-employed, they drive for Uber or Lyft, this gig economy business that we mentioned. You might be the owner of your company and have not been paying unemployment taxes on yourself, which, by the way, I wouldn't if I was an employer and I have a unemployment account and have employees. There's no point in paying unemployment tax on yourself because traditionally the officers of a corporation are not eligible for unemployment, or it's very rare when they are. But this PUA program is throws that out the window, and so people who normally aren't eligible for UI benefits are more often than not are eligible for PUA, and so because of the mass influx of claims, the people who have filed for PUA are eligible for. We had to draw the line somewhere and made their weekly benefit amount $158 plus the additional $600 from the FPUC. And so a lot of people, that finally went live and we started making payments this week. However, the people who applied for that, they were all backdated to the beginning of this pandemic, which was March 15th. So they were able to claim 6 or 7 weeks, and we paid that this week. So far, BEC's paid over $1 billion in benefits to employers and claimants, and a lot of people who have filed claims. We haven't paid that much money in the last 10 years. This is all in the last 6 weeks. We paid that much, which is, as you can imagine, unprecedented. So we have these claims coming in via internet through our call centers. And we've had to close our local offices as well, because, to the public anyways. The staff have been coming into work, but the public are not being allowed in yet. And so since they're not doing so much workforce services, the local offices traditionally focus on workforce services. We recruited most of them to work on employment claims. And the reason why is we've had over 500,000 claims filed since March 15th. Last year, for example, I think we had maybe 80,000 claims. So it's the massive claims is really bogged down the system, and of course our systems are 50 years old and are very, very slow. So currently, let me say this: we have the mass influx of claims really started on March 17th. From March 1st through March 17th, there was maybe an average of 200 to 300 claims per day, which when you have an unemployment rate of 2.5%, that's what you're going to get. Statewide, 200 or 300 claimants filing new claims per day. On March 16th, we had 2,000. On the 17th, 4,000. 18th, 8,000. The 20th, 16,000, and every day kept on doubling up to we're about the peak of the first week of April. We were getting 30, 40, 50,000 new claims per day. So with all our call centers and the local offices keying claims, processing claims, we can probably key, 4,000 claims a day. So we are way behind. And so at some point, at some level, the top brass decided to just let folks get paid right now because, typically as a claimant, you would not be paid benefits until your claim is processed. So if we waited to process them the proper way, it would take, people wouldn't get paid for months. So in order to minimize, to help people now, we've been paying people right away, whether the claim is worked or not. And that's going to cause problems because some people, regardless of their situation, are not going to be eligible for any of these unemployment claims. They've either never worked or they haven't worked in the last couple years, or they had like 1,000 employed and they filed an unemployment claim. And so sooner or later, those people are going to be caught. And we need the employer community's assistance to let us know who they are. That's why those separation reports are very important. So when we send one of those to an employer, it's asking, how long did they work for you? And are you paying them severance, vacation, holiday pay? And here soon we're going to have a method of letting us know, like if you applied for one of these PPP employees, if they're receiving unemployment, that's going to render it's going to make them not unemployed as far as we're concerned. So they shouldn't be receiving the PPE, the payment, Paycheck Protection Program money and unemployment. So if you're going to do that for your employees, let us know who they are so we can stop them from getting paid unemployment and limit the amount of overpayments that they're going to be. Because, if you at the end of the day, as a claimant, one way or another, we will let you know by mail. And at this rate, it might be months down the road. So there's going to be some people that are going to be unpleasantly surprised when they get a letter, and a lot of it is because they weren't totally honest with us when they filed their claim. We've seen a lot of situations where people are working full time and they had a part-time job at a restaurant or something. The restaurant closed down. They filed the claim, but they're still working full time for their employer. They're not unemployed, but they're not telling us that, so they're getting unemployment on top of their full-time wages. So those are big. And I'll give some information, especially in the QA session, about what method to use to let us know these things. So one as a claimant, when you're filing benefits each week, we ask you, are you able to work? Are you actively seeking work? Did you refuse any work? Are you working? Did you go back to work? So we have to trust the individual claimants to be honest with us. And let's see, it looks like my voice is going in and out. I don't know if that's on my end or what, but I'll try to speak a little slower. So when claimants don't tell us that they've been asked to come back to work, we consider that a job refusal. So we would need employers to let us know when that happens. My transmission is poor. Okay.
Michael, we lost from some of your statements. It wasn't totally clear, and I think that's what they're experiencing.
So, like I said, either paying people, back paying people, or they're not coming back to work. You're reopening even part-time or what have you. Let's see. I just gotta. Okay. Is to email us. Right now, the method will be to email us. Soon enough, we'll have a link on our website that will make it easier. But until then, you would email, and essentially you're emailing our chief of benefits. So let me give you that email address, and I can put it in the, maybe I can type it in this Q&A thing. Am I able to do that, Sandy?
Yes, you should be. That'll work fine. And we can also share this after the session. You can give me that information, and I can email everyone. Thank you.
But this email is kind of tricky, so you got to get it right, or we won't receive it. But it's essentially chief benefits, not chief of benefits, just chief benefits, CHIEFBENEFITS at VEC, like Virginia Employment Commission, .Virginia spelled out .gov. And in the email, you want to give us, a short description. I'm employer so-and-so. I'm paying I got a PPE loan or PPP loan, and I'm going to be paying these people back weeks effective, point A to point B. Or I offered this person a job on such and such date. As a cook, as a machinist, whatever your business is, whatever the position is, at this pay rate. And so then you want to give us a list of the people. So, put their full name, and for now, the last four of their social. We really can't email back and forth social security numbers. Unfortunately, our email system internally is not doesn't, our PII policies do not allow us to do that. So put the last four and then put some kind of contact number for yourself. So if we have questions about a particular claimant or what it is that you're trying to send us, we can call you or email you. Now, supposedly next week, there's going to be a link set up on our website, which is vec.virginia.gov, that will allow you to go into that website and report any people who are refusing to come back to work, or you're going to be paying them back pay. And so I wanted to talk about the job refusals, how that process works, and how the CARES Act is going to affect that. Typically, prior to this CARES Act, an unemployment claimant has to look for work, be available for work. If they're offered a job, it has to be a bona fide job offer. So you can't just send a mass text to all your staff saying, "Hey, I need you to come back." That's not going to be considered a bona fide offer. You really should either talk to them or send them a certified letter if they're not answering your calls. The best way would be a certified letter, because then they can't refute that they received that. And you want to be specific. I'm offering you this cook position, pays $10 an hour, Monday to Friday, whatever, as much detail as you can. So the person, one, can make a good informed decision on whether they want to come back to work or not. And, those are facts that the deputy that would be assigned that issue would understand, and would limit the amount of calls going back and forth. So once we are notified that, somebody has refused a job, an issue will go on their claim and they will stop being paid until it's adjudicated by a deputy. Unfortunately for claimants, these on March 30th. So since then, there has been like 400,000 new claims. So there's going to be, if you get an issue on your claim, it's going to be a while before it gets resolved. And certified offer, and it's a suitable job, which means, it's within a normal commute. It pays a prevailing wage, and the claimant refuses it, that's going to disqualify the claimant unless they say, well, I got laid off and I moved to California, so I live in a different area. That would be a reason for sure that was, you call somebody back and they say, I'm getting $800 in unemployment each week, or $900. I'm not coming back. Those people will be disqualified. But if they say, I'm a single mother, I have no family, the schools and the daycares are closed, I can't leave my kids alone while I come back to work, that might be a reason that they might be qualified for benefits. Regardless of what it is, let us adjudicate that. You just let us know if they refuse a job, or they quit, or whatever. Even during the pandemic, you still have to be able and available for work. So if you're not, that's going to be an issue for the claimant. And unfortunately, as we work these claims, we've seen all sorts of fraud. I saw one yesterday where an 11-year-old child filed a claim, actually got paid $6,000. So, we're working on, there's going to be years of cleaning up the people who are being paid that shouldn't be paid. And, unfortunately for some people where they should be paid, they might not be paid in a timely fashion. It's just, we only have so many people, we have antiquated systems, and, but everybody's doing the best they can. And like I said, most people are being paid. We've paid over $1 billion. So I'm probably running out of time here, but I'll go for, I do have a question here. Sandy, do you want me to wait till the afterwards or answer it now?
If you want to answer that question, well, please go ahead.
All right. The question is, how do you know if the business is protecting returning employees? You will be just taking the business's word? Well, we would hope that an employer would not tell us that they're going to pay them back pay and then not go ahead and go through with that. But, if that was the case, if the employer tells us, yeah, we're going to be paying these people back pay, it's going to stop that claimant. So if the claimant turns around and, we would notify the claimant with a decision at some point. And so if the claimant disagrees with any decision we write, or during the investigation, they say, hey, we didn't get any back pay, of course, we're going to investigate that. There's another question real quick. Michael's audio went out. He was talking about people who have made claims and then moved out of state. We would have offered them their position had they not moved. Will we be responsible if we offer the position and they choose to stay in this? If they choose to stay in the new state, I would make the offer, let the claimant make that decision. And if they turn you down, let us know about it. An issue will be established. It'll stop their payment, and we will, and then we'll determine if the reason they gave us is a good reason or not.
And Michael, we've got another question in the Q&A.
There's many good reasons, and there's a lot of not. I think refusal. Let us know about
it. Michael,
and
can you hear
see
me?
Those are the only. So, Sandy,
Michael, can you hear me?
Yes,
ma'am. I've got another question. What if employee does not want to return to work due to claims of health safety concerns? Can they still qualify for unemployment benefits? Also, what is the financial responsibility of the employer while employees are claiming unemployment?
Okay, good question. So let us know if you offer the job and they tell you I'm not, I'm medically compromised. I have a immune system, or I just, recover from cancer. There's a million reasons. If they tell us that, or if they tell you that, it's an issue. So let us know that there's an issue. The CARES Act talks about simply says, if you are unemployed because of the COVID-19 pandemic, you could be eligible for benefits. So to be fair, if somebody tells us that and shows medical proof, I have a medical condition, I whatever reason it is, it's like court. So when you're talking to a deputy, so you're going to have evidence. The employer will have to have evidence, the claimant will have to have evidence. So if their reason is medical, we're going to ask them to get something from their doctor saying, yes, this person just recovered from, I'm advising them not to go to work. And if they can show that, the claimant will still receive benefits. If the reason they're out of work is medical to begin with, and their separation is due to medical, in those cases, normally employers aren't charged, if they're the liable employer. But if it's a job refusal situation and we pay the claimant, so far our legislation should, the employer will still be liable for whatever benefits are paid. And so the second part of your question, what is the employer's financial responsibility on this? There's nothing in our Unemployment Act that says employers are going to be relieved of the regular unemployment charges, which may be shocking. That may change. You may want to pressure your elected officials to do something about that. But that, currently there's nothing in the law that says employers are going to be waived charges for the regular unemployment. Now, PUA, PEUC, FPUC, my understanding is that employers are, the federal government is going to take those charges.
Okay, Michael, we've got another one. For PUA, if a person has been working as a therapist or something like that, would a qualified job offer be in their area of expertise and they would not be required, to take the job like a cashier at a grocery store?
Well, it depends. If the person is a therapist, they're probably not, it's not covered employment. They're probably self-employed, and so, they wouldn't be, nobody would be offering them a job unless they're applying for work, if I'm understanding the question correctly. But depending on the situation, when we're determining if somebody refused a job for good cause or not, it doesn't really matter what their what their pay was before or what their position was before. I mean, there is some provisions for that, but mainly we determine, is it a bona fide job offer? Can you prove that you offered them the job? And is it a suitable job? And the deputies that make these determinations, they use our VEC LMI website to determine that. And you can do that yourself. It's a public website. And you can say, what does a cashier in Bristol, Virginia make? Well, what is the prevailing wage for that? So you can look that up. And if it's, $9.50 an hour and you're offering them $9.50 an hour or more, we're going to say that's a suitable job. Now, if you're offering them $7 or $7.25 an hour, we might say it's not suitable. So that's, but it's on an individual basis. It depends on each individual claimant and has to be researched for each individual claimant.
Great. That's all of the questions for right now. Melissa, do you have anything before we turn it over to Sarah?
No, but I thank Michael for covering all of that. With regard to the rapid response program, which is on the other end of the spectrum, when folks begin to go back to work, I want companies to understand that we are there to help them with their employees as they go back in the door. And we'll be able to find, if they're losing folks because they don't want to go back, we can help with finding suitable replacement employees. So I just want them to understand that we're available for that.
Okay, great. And Sarah, while you're setting up your slides, I've got one more question for our BEC folks. If you do know, if an employer reports an employee that is that they know is receiving benefits, like you, Michael, you gave the example as someone is working full-time, but they lost their part-time job. And so they're getting benefits for their part-time, but they're still working full-time. What happens to that person if they get caught?
If we determine that they were not unemployed or because each week we ask, did you do any work? It's a very basic question. So if they answer no to that, it's considered fraud. And so any benefits that they receive, they're going to receive a fraud overpayment letter, and they'll be liable to pay that money back. And we give you a few chances to pay it back. You can make payment arrangements, but if you ultimately just blow us off, we are authorized to take your federal and state tax returns back until the debt is settled. And and of course, any decision that we ever make is appealable. So as an employer or as a claimant, you disagree with what we've done, file an appeal. But yeah, any monies that you shouldn't receive, you're going to have to, if we determine that, you're going to have to pay the money back.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you both for joining us. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. What I'm preparing to talk about today are really three things. So we've got the unemployment issues that VEC covered, and now we're going to talk about policy updates that you need to be considering and thinking about, health concerns once your office or your business is reopened, and then employee concerns. So first, to sort of dive into policies. So I'm going to say upfront that I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an insurance broker. And I think it's really important that you check in with your other service providers to see if they have very specific guidance for you. But I think what we're first suggesting is that each business that has multiple employees forms a work group. That this is a cross-functional team. So you don't want only a leadership team making these decisions. Let's say you have 100 employees and some are line workers, some are, more C-suite executives. You need to have somebody from each sort of unit represented on the work team so that they can think about the very specific challenges that each type of employee is going to have in coming back to work. You want to begin by doing some feedback loops with employees. So checking in with them, asking them what's going on, just so that you have enough information so that you can make legitimate policy decisions. And then you want to perform a self-gap and barrier analysis. So you want to really look at when you are allowed to reopen, what gaps in your process are going to prevent you from being the healthiest possible. Some quick things on sort of law and advice. So one thing to remember is that an employee's health status is confidential. So we talked about with the VEC, if an employee discloses that they have an immune compromise themselves or someone in their family, or if they have tested positive at some point for COVID, you are legally allowed to share that information with public health agencies, but not other employees. So that's just a thing to keep in mind as you walk through all of this. And then you need to seek out insurance provider and legal experts. So it's really important for you to talk to your insurance company to figure out what are the coverages allowed in your liability policy. I've seen a couple of policies cover some business continuation pieces. I have seen lots of extra disclosures from insurance companies about the liability for customers and employees. So it's important for you to get an independent review of that on your specific policy. And the same with any legal issues that may come up. So in terms of updating your manuals, that sounds like a really boring thing, but it's important to have accurate ones in place. You want to make sure that your sick leave policies are compliant with the Family First Act. So this was with CARES, and essentially it requires paid sick leave under certain circumstances. That could be caring for a child due to lack of childcare, recovering from COVID yourself, or being the home health care for someone recovering from that. So if your policies don't allow for that now, you're going to want to update them. There's no termination end on the Family First Act. I'm sure at some point it will cancel out and say this is no longer applicable. If you have not received a PPP, also some of those sick leave and emergency family leave policies are going to be recoverable through federal payroll taxes. If you've gotten the PPP, you can't take the tax deduction, but your employees still are required to be offered that sick leave. The next thing is to have a safety response policy. So let's say you open, you have 10 employees, everyone is healthy, and then 2 months from now, someone on your team is diagnosed COVID-19 positive. You want to go ahead and think through now, what are your protocols? Are you going to shut down the office for 2 weeks? Are you going to shut it down for a day? What are your interactions with the community, with customers? So you want to go ahead and think through that policy before you open back up. In terms of rules and communicating with employees, when you make the decision to open because you are allowed to, or you've decided that it's best for your business, you want to make sure that you take into consideration language and literacy when you're posting any safety notifications and requirements for coming back to the office. So if you have people on your team that are not English as a primary language, you want to make sure that you have things translated because the onus is on the employer to make sure that employees understand what are the safety guidelines for coming back. You're going to want to communicate with employees in advance. So you have a workforce of 20, they're coming back in. You want to make sure that before they come back in, they know what is expected of them. You also want to establish and communicate clear social distancing guidelines that are specific to your type of business and the way that employees interact and the way that employees interact with customers. And then the tricky one where you're going to need to get expert advice, but to think about is the benefits. So it depends on how you bring an employee back in. If you bring an employee back in as a new hire, so if you terminated them or if you laid them off, but didn't leave it open for them to come back and you bring them in as a new hire, you're going to need to review your manual for, will they start with vacation automatically? What does that look like? If you furloughed employees, legally it's a little bit different. So that's just something to look at and be really careful and make sure that you are staying legal above all in, but also serving your employees. Okay, so let's talk about health. I'm not an epidemiologist. I am not a doctor, but these are some HR considerations to think about when you reopen. So I'm publishing these here. These are CDC's guidelines that they've offered to employers. These are accurate as of last night. Will they update? Of course, I'm sure, but I think it's just important for everyone to have this. So number one, having sick employees stay home. Establishing routine daily health employee checks. We'll talk in a minute about what I'm suggesting there. Monitoring absenteeism and having flexible time off policies. Having an action plan, that's that safety response plan that we were talking about. Creating and testing emergency communication channels for employees. So how are they going to get messages to managers and such? And then establishing some communications with state and local authorities. Just know that you have all of those numbers and things handy. So in terms of prevention, so our office is open and we're back to work. You want to create an expectation of health. So here, there's some mixed guidance as to whether or not you should be testing employees' temperatures and using that as one threshold. If you test an employee's temperature, that is protected health information, their literal temperature. And so you may consider having employees self-certify in some way that they have taken their temperature the morning before. But regardless, you need to create the guidelines for employees and let them know ahead of time. So if they've been exposed to COVID but have no symptoms, what does that look like? What are you asking them to do? What are you going to pay them for if they stay home? Another consideration is a tiered workforce. So this is changing the hours. So there's two different models. The first is you have Monday, Wednesday employees, and you have Tuesday, Thursday employees. So you would do that if everyone is required to work within close proximity, so they could continue working from home if they are able on the other days. The other option is to move to 2 shifts if you already don't have that. So you have sort of a morning shift and an afternoon evening shift. Again, all designed to reduce the total number of people. So recent studies have showed that it's really the closed air environments that are most at risk. So if you think of like a restaurant, the smaller in offices, the more likely it is that someone's infection will spread. That's why we're not seeing too many infections coming from grocery stores and things like that, because they are so large and have a lot of air circulation. So you want to think about anything you can do in terms of reducing closed air environments. So literally opening windows, but also can you just reduce the overall number of people that are present? Physical changes, so increasing distance. So if you have cubicles, that provides nice barriers. If you have an open workspace, or if you're in manufacturing and everyone is working on an assembly line or something together, those are all things for you to think about. You need to increase the distance. Airflow, we talked a little bit about, but just making sure you have adequate airflow and continuous movement. And then paying close attention to high contact areas. So many businesses in other states that have already reopened a little bit are scheduling bathroom breaks so that they can reduce the total number of people that would go there. They're closing break rooms or scheduling breaks, closing lunchrooms or scheduling lunch hours. Again, so these are areas where lots of people are going to congregate, and so reducing those at all costs. So I think as a business, you're going to want to think about what is safe, what is safer, and what is safest, and think about where do you fall on that spectrum? What are you attempting to attain? So in terms of equipment, the best practice here is if you're going to require people to wear gloves and a mask or other personal protective equipment, you should consider reimbursing or providing. In terms of cleaning protocols, it's going to be important for you to have some cleaning protocols. So what is it you're going to do? Who's going to do it? How are you going to clean your office, high traffic and high contact areas? And then next, what are your customer requirements? So if you're retail, if you're a restaurant, if you regularly have clients or customers entering your space, what are you going to ask them to do? So we saw last week that Costco is now requiring everyone that's coming into the grocery store to wear a mask. That is legal to do so. So that is a question on whether or not you want to do that and then how you will enforce it. Should you consider mandatory testing for employees? So the ADA requires that medical testing must be job related and consistent with business necessity. So right now, the CDC is not requiring employers to perform mandatory testing before someone comes back in or clear a negative test. As most of you in Virginia know, we don't really have enough tests yet. And so it's not something we're recommending. I do think if you're in a health related field or business that you may have some different considerations, but just keep in mind what the ADA requires. Okay, so opening back up some employee considerations. So one thing you want to be open to, and I think VEC talked about this a little bit, is your employees with special and unique circumstances. There's going to be no school until at least September. So any of your employees that have childcare responsibilities, that have children, may have some limitations. So you may be ready to open, but they may not be able to come back due to their childcare responsibilities. I think the other thing to think about is immune compromised households. So asthma, heart disease, all sorts of things that we know put people at greater risk for contracting a serious version of COVID-19. Those are really important to think about and consider. So it's perfectly fine to make across the board policies for your business, but it's going to be really important that you think about, especially in the first couple of weeks and month or so of reentry, your employees that have special and unique circumstances. And then the last one is transportation. So if any of your employees are taking public transportation, know that those services have been drastically reduced because they've been doing their own social distancing and health related policy changes. And so just being mindful that you may have some employees that are willing and able to return to work, but lack transportation to get there. So I do want to remind people that for lots of businesses that have been continuing, there are still some remote possibilities. So the question I've been asking people is, does can you open equal should you open? So we may have some limited openings available at the end of next week. It's what Northam's announcement said earlier this week. And so I think it's just something for businesses to think about. Can they mitigate a little bit longer? I mean, obviously, if you're a retail operation or you're a restaurant, something like that needs physical contact to be able to provide your services or wares, it's a different consideration. But if you are still able to do remote, consider it. I think it's also sort of a risk benefit analysis on what is the value of in-person. So how much can you get done without having to be physically present? And then continuing to build virtual skills among your team. And so I'm going to be doing another session for VEC in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk a lot more about this then, but I wanted to bring it up today, which is we're back in the office, and how do we rebuild our culture? So, the camaraderie that employees felt when they got together. And so these are just some things to keep in mind. Your employees have had differing levels and experiences with trauma and anxiety during the pandemic. So they may have lost family members and attended virtual funerals. They may have been sick themselves. They may just be very frightened about the world and news cycles and things. And so the mental health effects and after effects of the pandemic are definitely going to be present. So making sure that you have policies and procedures. If you have an employee assistance program, encouraging people to get mental health support as they re-enter the workforce. The next piece is really just a push for you to be as flexible as possible within guidelines. So creating guidelines that have enough openness that allows you to be flexible in case by case. I think with small businesses, our workforces are smaller. We have the ability to be a little bit more flexible versus an employer that has, 10,000 employees. You do need to provide some comprehensive training for your supervisors in terms of how to manage trauma and anxiety, but how to manage these conversations around health with their employees, how to walk them through unemployment decisions, accepting the job decisions, coming back into the office, and all of those pieces. So supervisors are going to need some coaching and guidance on how to have those conversations with their employees. And the last piece is it's worth it now to think about reimagining rituals that your company had. So if you always take someone to lunch for their birthday, if you do a monthly big birthday party celebration, what rituals are part of what makes your company special? And can you go ahead and begin to reimagine them now so that you can replace that? So you're not just strictly 100% back to business. Those are all of my sort of main pieces. And I acknowledge that there's certainly a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't covered just because everything is moving and changing so quickly. But if anybody has any questions.
We do have a question that I'm sure is for you, Sarah. What obligations do landlords have to make sure tenants are following CDC and public health guidelines for employee and customer client safety?
Yeah, so again, this is when you're going to need to reach out to your insurance company to get some information on your liability and requirements. So the CDC is allowing landlords to impose some health-related restrictions on tenants. So your obligation to do it is less than your ability to do it, if that makes sense. But you need to seek information from your insurance company on your liability coverage. They may ask you to go above and beyond and do something that you aren't otherwise going to do it. And this is specific to commercial landlords. It does not carry over for residential.
Okay, thank you. And
Yeah.
I think this question is for our friends at the Virginia Employment Commission. If a person receives the acceptance of UI with a monetary approval letter and then files weekly claims but does not receive their benefits even after a few weeks, what should that claimant do? I realize volume is very high and you are working hard. Just wondering from the employer perspective who cares about the employees they had to let go, if there's anything that can be done besides being patient. Thank you.
Hello, this is Michael again. It's a good question. You really, as an employer, you're not going to discuss a claimant with you unless you have their PIN number. So the best way to reach us is to reach out to your local office and your local office manager. On our website, every local office lists who the local office manager is and their email. Plus, each local office has a local office email address. You can find that on our website. Find local offices, whatever's closest to you, and send them an email or even call them if they have a phone number. The local offices have been instructed to answer every call and answer every email. So they've been doing a good job with that, and when they have limited access on what they can do on a claim. Right now, we just gave them basic access to actually key initial claims, but they can't really fix claims. But with myself and I have two counterparts that are kind of managing all the local office claim activity. When they run into issues, some issue that's out of the ordinary, they reach out to us and we look at it, and we tend to, if we can fix it, we fix it. Most of the claimants that are going to have long delays are the ones that reported they were fired or quit and really had nothing to do with the COVID situation. So, and unfortunately for those kind of claimants, they're going to have to wait till a deputy gets to them, which it could be months for some of them, which is unfortunate. But the best way to reach out to us is to email or call your local office.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, I think the next two may be you.
Yeah.
Any
Okay.
solid information about volunteers returning? They are not employees, but a valued workforce of Habitat.
Hi, Mary Kay. It's nice to see you or hear from you. So regarding volunteers, this people are not talking a lot about it yet. So my gut tells me that you're following most of the same guidelines as employees. I would imagine that they would need to adhere to the same kinds of health requirements that you're requiring of your employees. But I know some of your workforce is in the older ages, your volunteer workforce. So just thinking through that and having them sort of self-certify, but also probably reducing the total number of people on job sites. Or dispersing them physically. So having somebody over here working and someone over here. I think Northam has suggested that he's going to have more guidelines for people, when he releases things. I think we were expecting them today at 2:00 to see some of the specific guidelines that he's going to give. So there are very few federal guidelines. The CDC has recommendations, and then the state and locality levels are giving any more information. But I think in the case of your volunteers specifically, I would treat them very similarly than you are to the employees.
And one more, Sarah, by the nature of the COVID-19, it seems that employees over 70 sit on a fine line. Should protocols include a guideline that they telecommute if work can be done from home, at least initially, unless this is specifically stated they feel at a disadvantage when younger colleagues?
So this is a tricky one because you don't want to practice age discrimination. So I would not suggest making a policy based on age. I would make a policy based on risk factors. That would be the way to talk about it. But honestly, I think in the short term, the safest thing to do, so if you fall on the safe, safer, safest, the safest thing to do is if your business is not harmed by teleworking, then telework as long as you can. I think we're going to learn a lot about the virus and Virginia and how we're able to rebound in the first couple of weeks of phase one. So if we enter phase one next Friday, then that's suggesting 2 to 4 weeks. Then we would be entering phase two, which would allow groups of up to 50 by sort of mid-June or so. That's all best case scenario and, could be pulled away at any time. But I feel like if businesses can hold off until that June timeframe, we will have learned a little bit of lessons. You will have seen other businesses re-enter. I always tell people with parenting, the best advice that I can give people is just to observe other parents and see what they do. And you either hate it or you love it. And the same is said with business. So let some other people open and see what they do and say, oh my gosh, I hate that. I would never do that. Or, you can learn about it that way. So I think that's not a direct answer to your question, but not making age lines is really important. Talk about risk factors and having guidelines for your employees to operate within rather than you making decisions about who comes and goes other than if they have a positive COVID test.
Okay, one last question because we're running short on time. Businesses such as restaurants, retail, and theaters are going to need to maintain cleanliness. Are there specific guidelines for cleanliness in different business settings such as these that protect the public as well as the employees?
Yeah, so there are not official guidelines right now. Sarah, what we're seeing happen in other countries and states is that the total allowed population is cut in 2/3. So if you have 100 people that are typically fill up a restaurant, that the new capacity of the restaurant would be 30. That's creating some of the distancing that you need to have. Protocols for deep cleaning overnight, and cleaning of high traffic areas and requirements for your customers. But there's no official guidelines. Again, like I said, I think Northam is expecting to issue some and give people, specifically the couple of businesses that he's allowing to open in phase one, more detailed instructions for how to do it. So I would definitely look for those to come out.
Great. I don't see any other questions. I want to thank each of our panelists for joining us today. Again, as I stated earlier, I think everyone has a very full plate. So for taking an hour out of your time to join us, I greatly appreciate you doing that with us. One thing I wanted to mention is that our presenters will be back on Tuesday at 6 p.m. We're going to do kind of a repeat session. So if you have others in your network or community or other business colleagues that could benefit from this session, please invite them to join us. Also, I wanted to give a plug for next Friday's webinar. This will be focused on the road to recovery, trends impacting Main Streets, and it will be led by the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development and the National Main Street Center. Again, I thank each of you for participating today. If you have additional questions, you should know how to reach us at Virginia Community Capital, and we'll be happy to share with our panelists today. Again, thanks everyone, and I hope you have a great weekend. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.